Today I want to share a little bit about my diagnosis journey. I've had quite a few of you reaching out to me, asking me how everything began and how I figured everything out, and so I thought I would just make a video and share with you what all happened. So as long as I can remember, I have been sick, and by sick I just mean had lack of energy, not been feeling well. I always battled digestion issues my entire childhood. And honestly, my family and teachers growing up all thought that I was faking it because, like clockwork, every day after lunch in school, I would go to the nurse's office and say I didn't feel good. When afterwards is when I would have like gym or some other specific classes that I maybe didn't particularly like. And so teachers and my family thought that this was my way of getting out of those classes. So fast forward through my life of just feeling ill and thinking, oh, I'm gluten intolerant, or I'm lactose intolerant, or I just have anxiety disorders, I get stressed out all the time, or maybe I'm battling depression, to about 2015, I will say, was the year that I just felt like I was dying. And I remember telling my partner that a piece of me felt like it was missing. I felt like there was a hole in my brain, in my body, and that I just genuinely felt like my body was killing itself. So anytime I would go see doctors, I would say, I have an autoimmune disease, but I don't know which one, because the basic definition of an autoimmune disease is when your body is attacking itself. So I knew that was happening, but I didn't really know in what capacity. And doctors would always just say, oh, sure. And always it was in my head. That's what they would say. So doctors consistently didn't hear me or didn't value my experiences or validate those things or acknowledge them, which just made me feel crazy and less like a person. So in about 2016, I started to turn orange and I lost a ton of weight. I've always been a really active person, involved in backpacking and hiking and dance and theater and yoga and swimming. So I've always been in relatively small shape. But I was getting smaller and smaller, and there was no real reason why, because I ate all the time and I just kept shrinking. So along this journey, I had tried every single food tactic and gone through the autoimmune paleo protocol and gone through a 41-day reset, gone through so many different things to finally find what works for me, or what I thought worked for me at the time, until about April 2016, which I was sharing with my mom that I had gone to my gynecologist because I hadn't had a cycle in over 2 years, and we were just trying to figure out where things overlined, where in digestion, where in psychologically, how these things were connected, if they were connected. And so when I went to my gynecologist, they did some lab work on me and they got some levels back from my DHEA. I was producing less than 15, which is not okay. So they said, we're gonna send you to an endocrinologist and see what's going on. And so I told my mom that, oh, they're gonna send me to an endocrinologist. And she said, oh, your great grandmother had a weird endocrine disease. I'll have to look up what it's called. And she did some little research, and come to find out my great grandmother had Addison's disease. So when I went into the endocrinologist, the very first thing I said was, after sharing my history, I said, my mom also mentioned that my great grandmother had Addison's disease. What is that? And he just kind of looked at me and he went, oh yeah, you're really orange. Okay, we can test you for that. And kind of just finished out his paperwork, and he gave me a bunch of things to try for my stomach, and they did a bunch more labs. And then I got a phone call a few days later, which is just pretty much the worst way that they could have done it. They called me and left a voicemail and said that it was an emergency and I needed to call them immediately. And then when I tried to call the doctor's office back, no one answered. No one answered for an entire day. And as a patient who's going through things that you don't know what's happening in your body, and going and doing a test and waiting for the results, the last thing in the world you want is for someone to call you and then not pick up when you call them back. So eventually I just went to the doctor's office and I was like, what is going on? You can't call me and then not tell me what's happening. And they got me in and they brought me to the doctor, and he was like, yeah, you have Addison's disease and you have to start steroids today. And I had done very little research on Addison's prior to that being diagnosed, because I, in the past, have had a tendency to say, oh, I have that. Not full hypochondriac, but whenever I would hear a symptom that I could relate to, I would dive headfirst into that information and research about that disease. And so my family and my partner were like, just don't research about it, because you don't want to convince yourself it's something that you don't have. So literally, like the night before, I had done very little research, and I was like reading, and it said orange skin and loss of weight and fatigue and inability to process stress. And I was like, this is it. This is my disease. And then I was reading about how you have to do steroids, and this was all in the very beginning. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to take steroids because I don't do that kind of thing. Yes. And then, so in the doctor's office, he says, you have to start steroids today. And I was like, okay, well, what if I don't? Like, what if I don't do steroids? What's another alternative that I could go? And deadpan, he doesn't like skip a beat. He just goes, you're going to die, and very soon. And both me and my partner just kind of like look at each other, and then I just start sobbing. And the doctor's like, oh, I thought you knew the severity of this disease. And I was just like, I mean, I did, but no one really wants to be told in that aggressive way that you're gonna die unless you do something that you don't believe in. So fast forward to a couple hours later, there I was in Walgreens, like sitting in the car with the pills, just sobbing, going, as soon as I take this pill, I'm gonna be dependent on it for the rest of my life. And pros and cons and pros and cons. And obviously I chose to take the steroids because I'm still alive today, because I decided I wanted a longer life to be in the world and share magic and explore magic versus having a very short, low quality life. So then I got my steroids. But the funny thing is that my doctor didn't really know much about Addison's. And so he only prescribed me half of my steroid, and he did not prescribe me an emergency injection kit, and he also did not really inform me about my disease at all. He just said, you have Addison's, you have to take these pills or you'll die. And that was all I was given. And that's sometimes even more than a lot of people are given. So I spent the next couple months trying to manage these steroids and figuring out the amount. And I wound up discovering a Addison's support group, which I was so grateful for. And that community answered so many of my questions. And right off the bat, they were like, why don't you have a medical alert bracelet? And why aren't you taking your water retaining steroids? And why don't you have an emergency injection kit? And I was just like, I didn't know these were things I was supposed to have. So I did more and more research after developing my Addie friends, went back to my endocrinologist, and he was basically like, I guess you can do those things if you want. And I was just like, yes, I would like to live and do those things, so please can I have them? And he made it rather difficult. And I have found that a lot of people experience difficulty in getting the necessary medicine they need to live, which is a whole nother topic I could go on. So anyway, I got my steroids, was taking them. We all thought things were gonna be okay and things were gonna be normal. And I did a little bit more research about the other hormones that my body was missing, like the DHEA, which is not a necessary hormone to live, but it gives you better quality of life. More stamina, more energy. It's the sex hormone too. So it's kind of a pleasant thing to have. So I started taking that as well. My endocrinologist prescribed me 100 milligrams a day of that. And so I did that for a while. And a couple months later, I was sleeping maybe an hour a day. And I was losing more weight. And I was getting darker orange. And I started to feel completely insane. And I just was like, I thought I was done with this. Why is this happening again? And it got to the point where I literally didn't sleep for more than an hour for over a month each night. And I'd just be up pacing around our living room, going completely insane. And I went to our regular doctor, our primary care, and she said, go to the Mayo Clinic. Go to the Mayo Clinic. And I just said, you know, so many people talk about the Mayo Clinic. What is that, and how do you get into it? And I'll do a whole nother separate video on my Mayo Clinic experience. But anyway, I ended up going to the Mayo Clinic because we had done so much medical stuff that we reached our deductible. And so literally everything at the Mayo Clinic was going to be free. We paid for a plane ticket and a hotel. Everything else at the Mayo Clinic was taken care of. Basically, while I was there, I was given knowledge on my disease, the correct dosage of what I should be taking, when I should be taking them, and how to handle a crisis, which no other doctor ever prepared me for or informed me on. And at the Mayo Clinic, they gave me an actual DVD to watch to learn how to give myself or how my loved ones can give me an injection so I don't die. Pretty important information that the doctors just seem to leave out. So after my Mayo Clinic excursion, I came back into the real world. I got plugged into my full wellness routine and all the things that I do to manage my body and my mind from the inside and out. And fast forward to where we are now, and I'm finally, for the last, I would say since January of 2018, do I feel normal and good again. So it took a really long time to feel good in my body. And you know, of course, I still have bad days and days that I'm stuck in bed or days that I can't move, but they're not as often, they're not as frequent, and they don't typically last as long. I can manage them a lot better and I can bounce back a lot faster, which is huge, especially when you spent so much time fatigued or in pain. To have any sort of relief or knowing that it's not going to last forever is huge. So basically, I'm sharing this story to inform people what my diagnosis journey was and let you know that it takes time. It takes time to figure out what medicine, what dosage, what brand, what works for your body. It's literally like having a full-time job, an additional full-time job managing your health with all the doctor's visits and the results and the trying new things and journaling to make sure you know what's happening with your body and keeping track of everything. It's like having another job. But I promise it is so worth the hard work and so worth the journey to make it to the other side and feeling so good. I may not feel good forever and I may not have a super long life, but right now my life is good. My body feels good. My brain feels good. I no longer have anxiety or stress or as much pain or discomfort as I used to. And that's just time and learning and experience. So please reach out if you ever have questions or if you're just being newly diagnosed or someone you love is diagnosed and you don't really understand what's going on. Please support them and do as best as you can to be there for them because they're just trying to figure out this whole new job and this new body that they have to manage. But you're not alone. You have others around you who can support you and who can help you. And know that each day gets a little easier. It really does. Okay.